Iran has agreed to negotiate. That alone should raise suspicion. For 2 decades, Tehran has refused to surrender its nuclear ambitions. Now, with American warships circling and F-35s patrolling overhead, Iranian diplomats are sitting across from U.S. envoys in Muscat, Oman. The talks began on February 6, 2026. Washington's demands are maximalist. Tehran's position is desperate. And what neither side is saying matters far more than what they're willing to admit. The United States wants Iran to hand over 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, halt all nuclear weapons development, dismantle its ballistic missile program, and sever support for Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. In exchange, Iran gets sanctions relief and the promise that American bombers won't finish what they started in June 2025. On paper, this looks like diplomacy. In practice, it's a hostage negotiation, where Iran holds no hostages. 3 days before the talks, IRGC gunboats attempted to seize a U.S.-flagged tanker in the Strait of Hormuz. 6 armed vessels surrounded the Stena Imperative, ordering it to stop engines and prepare for boarding. The tanker accelerated away. The USS McFall moved in with air support. The Iranians backed off. Hours later, a US F-35C from the USS Abraham Lincoln shot down an Iranian Shahed 139 drone in the Arabian Sea. The drone had approached the carrier aggressively, roughly 500 miles from Iran's southern coast. U.S. Central Command called it self-defense. Iran called it provocation. Both are correct. These incidents were not accidents. They were signals. Iran wanted to demonstrate that it still controls access to the Strait of Hormuz, through which 21% of global oil passes daily. The United States wanted to show that it can operate freely in Iranian airspace and waters without consequence. Neither side blinked. Neither side won. And now they're negotiating under the shadow of those encounters. The backdrop to these talks is a military buildup that dwarfs anything seen in the region since the Iraq War. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group sits in the Arabian Sea with 3 destroyers and over 90 aircraft. Patriot and THAAD air defense systems have been deployed across the Gulf. Roughly 36 F-15 Strike Eagles are now stationed at Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan, double the normal presence. Over 30 aerial refueling tankers are positioned for extended strike operations. V-22 Ospreys are staged at Duqm Airport in Oman for search and rescue missions. This is not deterrence. This is preparation. Iran knows what's coming if the talks fail. In June 2025, Israeli and American strikes hit the Natanz and Fordo nuclear facilities. The attacks damaged centrifuge hulls, mixed enriched uranium with rubble, and set Iran's nuclear program back by months. But they didn't destroy it. Roughly 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium were unaccounted for after the strikes. Tehran had relocated the material in anticipation of the attack. If further enriched to 90%, that stockpile could produce enough fissile material for 9 nuclear weapons. As long as that uranium remains missing, the mission is unfinished. Washington's demand that Iran surrender this stockpile is non-negotiable. But Tehran faces a trap. If it hands over the uranium, it loses its only leverage. If it refuses, it invites another round of strikes that could be far more devastating. Iranian officials have floated the idea of transferring the material to a third party or participating in a regional enrichment consortium based in the UAE. But no such consortium exists. And even if it did, Iran's clerical leadership views full capitulation as a sovereignty breach. President Pezeshkian authorized what he called fair and equitable negotiations. But fairness is a luxury Iran cannot afford. The country's economy has collapsed. The rial has lost 40% of its value against the dollar in the past 7 months. Inflation is crushing ordinary citizens. Energy shortages plague the country every winter. And the government has no meaningful stimulus to offer. Pezeshkian was elected in 2024 precisely because he promised to negotiate a new nuclear deal, and those talks failed. Now he's trying again, but from a position of extreme weakness. The United States, meanwhile, is not interested in compromise. Trump's maximum pressure campaign never ended. It simply paused. Now it's back, and the demands have expanded. Washington wants Iran to stop enriching uranium entirely, dismantle its ballistic missile infrastructure, and cut off support for proxy groups across the region. These are not negotiating positions. They are ultimatums. Iran has rejected any discussion of its ballistic missiles. Hours before the Muscat talks began, the IRGC deployed its Khorramshahr-4 missile from underground facilities. The missile has a range of 2,000 kilometers and carries a 1,500-kilogram warhead. The deployment was a message. Iran's missile program is non-negotiable. During the 12-day war in June 2025, Iranian missiles struck Israeli and U.S. targets with precision. Tehran lost roughly half its missile launchers and stockpiles in retaliatory strikes, but the program survived, and it's rebuilding. With foreign assistance, Iran could produce 300 missiles per month. That's not a deterrent. That's an arsenal. The same logic applies to Iran's support for Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. These groups are not proxies in the traditional sense. They are extensions of Iranian power. Cutting them off would mean abandoning decades of investment and influence. Tehran will not do that voluntarily, and Washington knows it. Which raises the question, if the U.S. demands are impossible to meet, why are the talks happening at all? The answer lies in what both sides are hiding. For the United States, since these negotiations provide political cover for military action. If Iran refuses to comply, Trump can claim he tried diplomacy before ordering strikes. For Iran, the talks buy time. Every day spent negotiating is a day the bombs don't fall. Both sides are playing for position, not resolution. There are 3 possible outcomes. The first is a limited agreement. Iran hands over the 400 kilograms of enriched uranium in exchange for partial sanctions relief. Ballistic missiles and proxy support remain off the table. This would stabilize the immediate crisis, but solve nothing. Iran would retain the capacity to restart enrichment within months. The United States would retain the option to strike at any time. The cycle would continue. The second outcome is escalation. Talks collapse. The United States launches a sustained air campaign targeting Iran's nuclear sites, missile infrastructure, and IRGC command centers. Iran retaliates by attacking U.S. bases in the Gulf, harassing shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, and activating proxy forces across the region. The conflict spreads, oil prices spike, and the United States finds itself in another open-ended Middle Eastern war with no clear exit strategy. The third outcome is the most dangerous. Iran agrees to everything. It surrenders the uranium, dismantles its missiles, and cuts off its proxies. But the moment the government shows weakness, internal factions move. The IRGC consolidates power, protests intensify, and the country fractures along ethnic and political fault lines. What follows is not peace, but chaos. And chaos in Iran means chaos across the region. But none of these outcomes are good. But one of them is inevitable. The talks in Muscat are not about finding common ground. They are about determining which version of failure both sides can live with. Iran has agreed to negotiate because it has no other choice. The United States is negotiating because it prefers to strike with legitimacy. And the rest of the world is watching to see who blinks first. The fuse is burning. The question is not whether it reaches the powder. The question is how much damage the explosion will cause.